Great, we're good to go. So good afternoon and welcome to Trench Talk on Tuesday, our once a month series of conversations with some of the most fascinating personalities from the world of real estate. You know, these are folks who are questioning the status quo and who are using technology for scaling efficiency in their businesses. I'm delighted to be speaking today with three leaders who are really ahead of the curve and are writing the playbook for making real estate development more sustainable. And I'm going to start my introductions now. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Sunita Purushottam, is the head of sustainability at Mahindra Life Spaces, who are pioneering net zero homes in India. If you have a finger on that pulse. Sunita holds a PhD in environmental science and engineering from IIT Mumbai, and over her 25 plus years in the industry, she has worked on regulatory bodies in the UK and in India, and has worked on large infrastructure and city planning projects as well. And I find her LinkedIn feed really fascinating, where she documents and chronicles a lot of urban flora. I think you guys should all check it out. Welcome, Sunita. We've got Nirmita Chandrasekhar on the panel as well. She leads the Built Environment program at Selco Foundation. Her work focuses on democratizing architecture and poverty alleviation through asset creation of climate resilient and energy optimized infrastructure for the poor, for the lower strata of the society. She's more often out in the field, right in the trenches. Her current muse, I think, is Meghalaya. She happens to be in Bangalore this week, I think. And there's a pretty interesting fact about her. She has the unique distinction of being the first of our guests to make a repeat appearance. So nobody can, push you from that perch. Nirmita, we are really fans of yours, clearly. Welcome back. And last but certainly not the least, Suhail Rehman is the torchbearer in making sustainable choices and tech intervention in construction, even before it became fashionable. He's the MD and CEO of GoEvolve Estates, where under his leadership, the company won the Leadership in Sustainable Design and Performance Award, which was a Asia-Pacific, Asia-wide kind of a recognition for their path-defining initiative, which makes them amongst the highest rated green homes community in India. Suhail is also an early adopter of startups. It's a very high risk propensity, of course, but may your tribe increase. Suhail, we need more of you in this ecosystem. Absolutely. Welcome everybody to Trench Talks. So before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that you can ask your questions towards the end of the hour, or just drop it in the chat below, or raise your hand, and time permitting, we'll get you to ask your question on video directly. So be good to go. So I'm going to get the ball rolling with a very fundamental question. I want to start with Sunita here. What is your definition of sustainability, Sunita? I know you've spent many decades in this industry, but your definition of sustainability and how does it kind of morph in the world of real estate and construction? And you'll have to unmute yourself, I think.
Yeah, to keep it short, it's a very short answer that I have. It's basically, if you look at the system that we are working in, which is we call business, right? Business and all economic activities, but it's being sustained by an outer circle, which is called the society, which survives within the larger environment. And this can only survive if the larger outer two circles are intact. So if the outer circle disintegrates, the inner circle does, and so does the business. So that's what sustainability is all about.
It's an interesting take. Nirmita, anything you want to add to that?
So I mean, it's also sustainability is multifaceted, right? So, but I think the realm in which we sort of like to function is also what Sunita ma'am has also outlined, which is society. We put people in the center. So while there could be multiple prongs of what sustainability means to different people, for us, I think when we do programs and we work with community, it's integral that we put people in the center. You look at what kinds of sort of solutions in the long run can sort of enable communities to be much more sustainable. So I think that is the core for us. And within that, whether it is sustainable practices, conservation, whatever it may be, sort of comes as what do you call it, annexes to what makes sort of habitat sustainable for communities. So, I mean, that's another sort of definition that we like to sort of follow when we look at programs. So, yeah.
Nice. And Suhail, I know you started much earlier than many others in Bangalore, right? Did you have like a clear idea about what sustainability meant to you then, and has it morphed from then to where you are today?
Back then, absolutely not. I basically embarked on this journey just to sort of have a different marketing pitch for my products. That was my introduction to sustainability, so to speak. One of my sales guys told me, why don't you look at IGBC Gold? And that's when I got introduced to the entire world of sustainability. And then we deep dove and a lot of mistakes along the way. And then we morphed into what we're doing today. So basically, I mean, my take is that any building that uses lesser resources and generates lesser waste to landfills as compared to your NBC norms for an India perspective is sustainable.
So, I mean, can they all coexist? Environmental, it moved for you from marketing to actual, real tangible action. So environmental, social, and economic sustainability. Is there a case? How do they even coexist together in this business?
So it's for me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so environmental and social, yes, definitely go together. But economics, it depends on whose perspective. If it is a builder's perspective, it's still a long way to go before we get for it to be economically viable for a builder, so to speak. But there are a lot of people in the domain who are trying to make it affordable and stuff. So we sort of tend to treat it as CER, like CSR, corporate environmental responsibility. So you do it because you need the planet to be a better place for your future generations as well. That's how we look at it.
Interesting. I'm going to come to you, Sunita. So at an individual level, and it's a kind of an extension of my last question to Suhail as well. So individually, many of us have changed our behavior, our consumption patterns, etc. Use plastic less, reusable, stuff in our daily lives, etc. Which is great. But for a bigger impact, the intervention and change has to happen inorganically, which is where your organizations have been unique, where my question is, what is the specific impetus for your company in embracing these greener options? Why are you doing it?
So basically, we had launched a project recently where we had said that the maintenance cost will be 50% lower than the maintenance cost in any other society in the vicinity of that project. And that was taken up very well. And the interventions that were based on sustainability. And so one of the key observations is that how can we make that a key metric for driving business excellence is how can we reduce the maintenance cost? Because it's not the upfront cost of construction alone that we should be concerned with, but are these homes going to be healthy for you and enable you to save money and costs over the lifetime is the key driver, I would say. So it's not just about doing good for the environment, but also how can all the initiatives enable you to have lower cost of maintenance while maintaining health and well-being through the life of the project. So that's the.
So my immediate follow-up question to that, Sunita, would be, largely with developers, once they hand over a flat or a society to the RWA, let's say, isn't their work done? Why would they remain invested? And, how have you kind of crossed that chasm?
You have to understand the larger contribution that your business does to science, to the emissions inventory. Okay, so if you do your own carbon footprint, you will understand that there is your primary responsibility, which is scope 1, scope 2, right? Your energy and fossil fuel that you directly consume, and which is the scope 3, which you are influencing. And to keep that under control, we are actually, we have committed to science-based targets. So that means 1.5 degree pathway. to keep the temperature to 1.5 degree, you would actually have to look beyond your direct influence. You have to look how you are, what kind of products you are making. And that's what has brought a shift in the thought process, that it is not about how you operate, but what you are making that could have long-term impacts on the, so it's basically doing a responsible product development, which of course transcends the thing that, after I've sold the flat, it's done. So you could always, shirk your responsibilities around that. But then if the product is designed well and you can ensure that, your carbon footprint, because the carbon footprint of a building is over 50 years. Okay, and if you have designed it well, if you have put the right interventions, you can ensure that it meets that requirement. So therefore, the shirking of responsibility needs to have a, stop somewhere, because we have to be able to design things better. So whether it is a circular economy initiative, or whether it is to look at, so it's going to happen anyway. So EPR is going to happen, is happening for many products. Extended producer responsibility is already happening. So applying it to a building, it's about how you design the whole thing better, so that all the residents who are availing it, which is a long lifetime project, isn't it? So it's not about building it, giving it, and therefore it's ensuring that this performs in a way it's supposed to perform, such that there is thermal comfort, health, well-being, ventilation, enough light, and all of that, and it serves the purpose. And to be able to do that, I think you really need to spend time upfront when you are doing the design and what you're going to, put into the product. And what we have found, and many people in the building sector have found, if you do it right upfront, these costs could be cost impacts on the cost of construction could be relatively lower than doing retrofit.
Right.
So now if India government wants to do retrofits on all the buildings that are already made, there'll be a huge cost.
Right.
It's about the time, it's about, what is your boundary and why it should be your boundary.
So it's also a long period that you're looking at. I mean, you're also forcing societal change, I suppose, with tweaks that you're doing and how you're approaching a building from scratch, right?
Yeah.
If I kind of do a little bit of a shift towards Nirmita with a similar question, is the awareness about sustainability as high in the sector that you all operate in? Because here, you are making the decision, I suppose, on behalf of the occupiers of your spaces, right? So how do you kind of justify your decisions there?
So there are two prongs to answer this question, right? So also sort of lending some of the things that Sunita was mentioning about this, a lot of the things that what we recognize are issues when you work in communities, one being thermal comfort, productivity, well-being of the end users or the communities that we work with, right? It's not necessarily something that the community itself would put in the forefront of the problem. And what happens is that when you start addressing these issues, right, when you start looking at thermal comfort or productivity or well-being, you're automatically looking at very simple concepts of natural ventilation, lighting, etc., coming into play, reducing heat, XYZ, right? And all of those sort of practices automatically also ensure that when you're looking at operational costs of running buildings, or when you're looking at the capital investment required to sort of construct itself, right? You are packaging it in a manner that it is sort of in the long run much more sustainable, the way you sort of approach building construction itself. So for us, when it comes down to sort of working in a space where there is no demand, so to say, or a need necessarily for the solutions that we have, a large part of awareness building is going back to the community, sort of co-developing and co-designing sort of solutions, trying to sort of articulate and demonstrate, right? A lot of work goes into demonstration, in the communities. Like we work a lot in North Karnataka and in other heat stressed regions in just looking at cool roofing solutions, because people are able to articulate that, yeah, I have every summer a new cooler in my house because it's so hot, and obviously these equipments are not necessarily more energy efficient or long sustaining, right? Potentially even every year, every cycle, it sort of stops working. So when you suddenly start looking at a capital investment for a cool roofing solution, it just becomes much more evident that yes, this is a much more practical solution for me in the long run. So we have been over the past 4-5 years very focused in looking at R&D, looking at how do you look at economics for such kinds of solutions for communities that are poor, what kind of sort of financial packages are required, because I can go around, talking about cool roofing in sort of these communities we work in, but the uptake and the sort of scale for these kinds of products is only possible if you're able to demonstrate what kind of impacts you as an end user and occupier of the space can sort of observe. And that is also true for when you're working with governments in spaces for, sort of institutions where the poor sort of interact with. So when you're looking at health centers or Anganwadis or mass housing programs, right? So again, for us, what becomes important is we're able to establish with those entities that in the long run, again, your operational costs are going to go down. So for us, it is about telling an entity like a state government that if you look at construction of XYZ number of buildings, they have to be able to be resilient. They have to be able to keep your operational costs down, because you will not be able to maintain these buildings in the long run. So so we do a lot of evidence building, a lot of awareness sort of to go in hand with the kind of sort of projects that we do, because you rightly said there is no demand because people don't usually put themselves first in such conditions. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, a lot of these interventions I'm hearing, I mean, especially from Sunita and Suhail, are interventions that you're doing on new projects. It's really, really difficult to kind of do all this on a building that already exists. Whereas, almost 100% of the built world right now exists out there. So do you have any kind of thoughts on how do you kind of go back to people that are already occupying these spaces and go back with these interventions that you're successfully trying out in new developments? Sunita or Suhail?
So, would you like to go first? Or?
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah. So, I mean, there are a few things that can be done once the building is completed, which are more to do with IoT-based interventions in terms of water efficiency and stuff, and probably cool roofing and things like that. But many things probably cost you a lot of money to intervene and redo stuff to make it truly sustainable. For example, your home being a thermal comfort is something which is quite expensive to achieve if you have to go back and do it again. But not so much in terms of water conservation. There are, I'm sure, startups within REAP itself doing a great job in IoT-based water metering and stuff. So that's my take on going back and doing. But then it's like Sunita mentioned earlier, if you design it right with a lot of thought going into it at the drawing board level, you can make wonderful buildings at pretty much same or even lower cost of construction of a regular building. It is quite possible, but you really need to put your heart and brains into it. Yeah, I think Sunita can take over.
Yeah, thank you. So we can look at it very optimistically, Gautam. Optimistically in the sense that if you divide the building stock into two types of building, one which is buildings that are good basis traditional architecture, urban India to a large extent till 60s 70s had good buildings. So okay, 60s 70s 80s also. So it's when we started looking at 90s 2000 onwards, a lot of glass started coming to picture. So glass brings also a lot of ability to build fast, quickly, and so on. And then there is now a huge shift to Maivan, which is so both these products which enable faster buildings, allow scale, have to be built with, have to be, treated with a lot of responsible usage, right? So you have to ensure that the projections are there, the shades are there, the wall to window ratios are met, the glass is of a particular type, there is a lot of shading, the wall is of a particular thickness so that the thermal comfort. So if you don't do these, you end up with bad buildings. So what do you do with the bad buildings? One is many of the residents within those buildings don't know that this is a bad building. And if you take your camera, and this is one thing that I want to do, is photograph buildings which don't have shade, photograph buildings which are completely glass facade and getting, east, west, and southern, a lot of southern and east, west sun. So people in there don't know that this shouldn't have been built, right? So one of the hope is that in redevelopment, they will realize that this shouldn't have been done because they're AC. But there is a, I don't know whether there is a solution. It is going to be very costly to fix bad buildings. And the entire stock of bad buildings have come in suddenly, and a lot of them. Okay. And you go any road in a heavily constructed city or a place, you will see bad buildings all over the place. Okay. Compare it to the earlier buildings, which are better buildings, thicker walls, cooler homes. They don't need air conditioning, and we are a hot country, right? So I wouldn't discount all the buildings that are there, which are currently existing, to be bad. The bad buildings you can actually identify. And how do you then spread the awareness amongst people who are going to be making bad buildings to stop doing so going forward? So that's one action that has to be immediately actionized. And for all those who are residing and working out of bad buildings to become aware that your health is getting impacted, one, because
and I don't think they don't get paid more than the average worker.
Yeah, there's somebody.
Could we have the other participant go on mute, please? Thanks, Ravi.
So I don't know whether there is a solution, because it's going to be extremely time consuming and monetary impact on to be able to engage with the entire stock of bad building owners, which are electricity guzzlers, which require cooling, which weren't supposed to be there in a country like ours, right? Many of these are office buildings. Many of these are homes which require ACs with very bad ventilation, no lighting, and so on. So even the value homes have this kind of structures. So I think a huge shift both in awareness is required, plus it is a right to stay in a good building.
So yeah, I mean, I think it again,
but it's going to be tough.
It comes down to economics, I suppose. Well, awareness might go up, and hopefully to a point where people would not think twice about the expense that they might have to expend for getting a building retrofitted into something nicer. So which is going to be my next question. And maybe let me ask Suhail that, is sustainability profitable at all? What is the business case for you now? I know you started off with marketing as your primary driver, but is it really profitable? How do you even justify the extra effort and risk that you are taking in introducing sustainable choices in your construction?
So we start off with corporate environment responsibility, as I said, and profitability, so to speak, is a byproduct. If it happens, good. But in my last project, I was pretty fortunate with Corona. We were able to make it quite successful. Wherein pre-Corona, we were, let's say, doing X rupees, and post-Corona, the product was just ready, and we were able to jack up the prices by almost 35% in about 2-3 months time, and we were selling at about 20% above the market price, where we had a good product and sustainability features were appreciated. But definitely there's no buyer right now who says that I want a sustainable product. We are far away from that reality. If you have the features, yes, well and good, but what's my best offer? That's today's customer. So the discerning client is yet to be there to demand a sustainable home. But yes, with startups like the ones coming out of REAP, each who focuses on different aspects of sustainability, it can definitely be made, like I said, cost of construction reduced if you design it right. Obviously, it will then go to be much profitable, not just for the developer, but also for the community at large. As Sunita was saying, your cost of maintenance comes down drastically. Your health, the way you live in communities are much better. So overall, if people move to sustainability, it's win-win for nature, for people, for builders, for everyone.
So, I mean, there are numbers, where, and these are coming more from the West, Europe and the US primarily, where green buildings seem to be attracting a premium of 6 to 8%, especially over the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, are we there yet as an economy, or are we lagging? Are we even seeing any kind of a premium? Maybe Sunita, you might have those numbers with all the work that you do.
So attracting a premium in the sense the value escalation of green
The value
homes?
escalation, the rentals,
So,
especially
so
commercial.
I'll give you a personal example. The home that I stay in, it is a high rise, and we did a lot of interventions on it. It was not something that was part of the initial thing. We looked at how we can reduce our waste, entire waste segregation system. We have actually solarified. So it is India's highest residential rooftop solar project. It's 380 kWp, and it's net metered. We are saving a lot of money. So our unit, which is around 8 towers, is most coveted, and we have a higher price compared to the other units. So there are 31 towers over there. We are in 8 towers. But if you ask anybody, where do you want to buy? And what is the price of ours versus the other towers? Ours is definitely higher in terms of the value that people can get out of selling over there. So it's the most coveted set of apartments that people. So definitely we've seen that. We've done a lot of water-based interventions also, aerators, water treatment plant, metering, and so on. So all these interventions definitely don't go unnoticed. People understand that this becomes, and tech interventions also for water metering. So these definitely, so it's a live case where we see that this is a higher. Definitely our green buildings have a good market pricing. And we've seen that in comparison of, so we've been selling green buildings since 2014, right? And in the same area, the price that our project is gathering is definitely much more higher, much higher. And I have data for that. I don't remember the exact percentage, but I saw the numbers and I felt so happy that people can actually, if we were to go back to people and say, hey, this is the value you're getting by buying a green home, that would be really great. But we definitely have numbers and live cases where, but a study as such, I don't think we have. I haven't seen.
Okay. So, Nimita, how do you measure ROI? Sorry. So
can I ask a question to Sunita?
Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, you're talking about Mahindra homes, right? So how
Mahindra
much of the premium would be Mahindra rather than a green building? So I would attribute that to be a Mahindra's brand value rather than a green building.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. We have done one project launch completely on sustainability now.
There is a net zero carbon.
Net zero, yeah, completely unsustainable. And there is a value associated with Mahindra, but the projects are definitely differentiated. Even the older projects gather a good price.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I was coming to Nirmita about how do you measure ROI for your projects? Because the traditional urban development, we seem to have a good handle on that, right? But ROI that for your project, but even if you kind of double click a little below, ROI for the interventions that you are undertaking for climate action, not for sustainability, would be even better if you do that.
I mean, it's so different for different types and scales and of projects we do and for different kinds of partners we work with, because a lot of what we are discussing over here right now is how we work with developers for, like, say, labor colonies, because for them it is about sort of looking at operational costs, running costs, portability, and like these, how much of upcycling can you do of the existing system. So with there, for us, it's very important to look at more than the build itself and the sort of energy used in lights and fans. It becomes about sort of how much can you bring back, how much of the solar sort of can offload their need for grid, how much like, so it becomes more about those things when you're looking at institutions and organizations of that sort. But we're looking at footprints. I mean, the kinds of projects that we're working on are like 200, 300, 400 square feet. I mean, these are like minuscule, right? So for us, what we don't necessarily have an ROI from that perspective, but what we look at is how the interventions that we do sort of improve savings or improve incomes of the people that we work for. So when we're talking about productivity and well-being, that's how it sort of ties back. And then the other piece that we focus on when it comes to looking at a return on the sort of investment that communities may be put into better built environments would also be looking at how much quality of life improves, so to say. I can maybe give you a very simple example, right? We're working right now in Meghalaya, and we're working with these nurses who sort of run and manage health centers at a very village local level. So for them, having a better infrastructure, having sort of less drudgery associated with sort of maintaining and running of these health facilities allows for more time for family, allows for more time with children. And so, I mean, there's not necessarily a value that you can put to that. It's more about the quality of life itself. And I think for us, the biggest debate has been like, who is the stakeholder and what we see as the value of the investment. And then accordingly, we sort of work with different sort of stakeholders. So it becomes very important to look at that lens. And if I can maybe look at more from the livelihoods perspective, right? We work with blacksmithies, for example, who necessarily would never invest in in safety gear, forget about a better workspace. But when you sort of go into looking at how hazardous their workspaces are to themselves, right? I think I was giving you this example itself. By 45, 40 years, most of them say that they stop working because of how many productive years they lose because of how drudgerous their work is. So for us, that equates to then X amount of extra years they're able to work and sort of, make incomes for their families. And sort of that becomes another sort of measure for us. So it becomes more about looking at it from that lens, as opposed to maybe an economics of scale or looking at investment from that perspective.
But I don't think it is that disparate either, because like Sunita mentioned, over the long term, it is about improving the quality of life, making better decisions through the time that you're going to be occupying that space. I think there is definitely convergence there, whether it is a premium luxury, apartment, or whether it is something that we're building for, someone else. Now, which actually also brings me to the importance of measurability, right? I mean, what are the benchmarks that you think are important to gauge the success of all these interventions, right? Where in your case, you're looking at whether it is making a difference to somebody's life, increasing their professional lifespan by 3 or 4 years. But I think, maybe Suhail or Sunita might have something more tangible about how do they measure the success? What are the tangible rewards that you see from making these sometimes major pivots, sometimes micro pivots?
So when it
go ahead, Sunita.
Yeah. So when it comes to energy, it's very simple. It's the EPI, and what is the number of comfort hours that you can give? That's measurable. You can model it and say, okay, this is the number of comfort hours, and whether you can or not, whether you can afford not to buy an AC. I mean, AC-free homes or something like that. So these are all measurable. It is through simulations. That is the tangible thing when it comes to energy. Then water productivity index is there. Diversion away from landfill is another parameter that we look at. So these are some of the tangible KPIs that we can quantify. number of trees transplanted, trees per home, trees, you have planted times the trees cut, native species introduced, the even a simple parameter such as temperature of the roof versus, can be a good KPI to indicate that, this is a better home compared to. So there are many different parameters that can be. I think a rating makes it much more difficult and intangible. While you can say that it is a platinum certified home and all, sometimes it may not mean many things to the customer. So we are trying to break it down and get it into numbers that people can relate to, that X amount of money saved on your electricity bills. Something like water saved per tankers avoided, things like that. Equivalencies are very important rather than just say that this is a IGBC certified home. So
right.
we're looking
I mean,
at that.
Suhail, I know you've used VGOT, EcoSTP has been, famously installed at Northern Star. Now, how do you kind of, number one, measure the impact that these companies are creating on your behalf? And does that kind of domino into, do you share this information with the residents? Do they see like their monthly expenditure going down by, X 100 rupees every month or whatever that number is, right? I mean, is there some kind of a framework that you kind of created for this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we went at the outset, we designed it and we had committed that we will reduce your dependence on fresh water by about 65% is the commitment that we had given. And on that, with the help of we got a rich data by which we have right now with about 80% occupancy, we have touched about 60% savings in fresh water. So the demand is brought down to 40% only. And we are sharing this month on month and saying that this is the number of tankers that you're saving every month in comparison to a project that does not do this. And there's a lot of appreciation for that. So that's a straightforward, tangible in terms of water that we are able to showcase. In terms of energy, we're not really able to do as much. Yes, projections and simulations are possible, but then the tangible savings, we are not really able to map it once they start using it. But in water, it is easy. Not so much in electricity or electrical domain. Then what was the other question you asked?
No, I mean, I was looking more at about, how do you tangibly prove to somebody that,
Yeah, so the interesting scenario we had was that we had a lot of fight with our residents in terms of the borewells not functioning and things like that. And this data was what helped us win over the argument with them that we are not really selling borewells, we are selling you sustainable homes. And our commitment is to reduce what you consume from the ground. And these numbers help me prove the point that this is what we are doing rather than depending on the natural resource, which we can't really guarantee. So there's no guarantee where you dig a borehole, you're going to get water. But this is something we can guarantee that what you use is reduced by 60% or X number of percentage points.
Interesting. So Sunita, you alluded to IGBC ratings as an interesting driver. And my question is around, how important are these regulatory suggestive bodies? Are they necessary for the industry to make positive strides towards, greater sustainability, or is it more seen as a framework that then everybody abides by?
It's a framework. It's a guiding framework, because otherwise we can go creating your own framework becomes difficult. You can do that also, but it's better to be able to say compare it, right? So comparability becomes easier. It also IGBC, Griha, or other, there is Edge, there is Lead. All of these have a good market recall amongst practitioners as well as amongst homeowners. In fact, I heard a conversation with a local developer who's into redevelopment, and he was talking about how his homes are IGBC certified and how these homes are better. So I think people have started understanding that these also matter, and a home which is rated could probably be definitely be better than a home which is not rated, because somebody has looked at the information, somebody has, probably done a site visit to give you the final certification. Uh, so there is also what we need to do is pre-certification is one thing, and then the final certification is the other. So there's a gap between how many are finally certified compared to the pre-certified buildings. So it's actually to get the final certification, you will really have to do the site visit and the, IGBC folks or RIA visit, and then the final certification is given. So third-party validation definitely helps. There are, if you don't do IGBC green home certification, you can go for society certifications also. So,
Right.
so it's a third-party validation is good, because then you know that these are the criteria. This is how you're going to be rated, and this is level 1, level 2, or you have met this many number of points. So it becomes very easy to see where you are and what more you can do. I think it has its use.
And also, it probably prepares businesses to be ready when these might become mandates at some point. Governmental mandates. And I think, and I hope that happens sooner than later.
So I have a point over there. So already, if you look at the IGBC rating and you look at the MOEF requirement, I would say 50% of the critical mandatory points in IGBC are actually the regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So they are covered under regulations. So MOF is already on top of many of these points, whether it is rainwater harvesting or whether it is number of trees, whether and so on.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, now, we work with startups, that's our bread and butter here at Brigade Reap, right? So my next question, and I'm going to look to Nirmita first, where interesting startups, okay, with responsibility for any enterprise is really, really difficult, because how do you even trust a startup that has no visibility in their own lifespan? 6 months later, are they even going to be around, right? And all the three of you are actually early adopters many times over. What gives you this confidence in startups? I'm sure some of it has worked, many of it might have failed, right? But I just want to kind of dig a little deeper about what is that confidence, and why are you even choosing to work with startups?
I think there are two again points to this, because I think when we were also sort of entering into the construction space, right? Construction as an industry is a dinosaur. There is, at least when we were looking at what is innovative out there, right? There was absolutely nothing to sort of quench that appetite of looking something. And especially as a young architect, when I was starting off, there was just like, you were just allowed with a few, also lending to the previous conversation, because of the way frameworks are designed and codes are designed, there's very little allowance for you to even try something beyond looking at design strategies when it comes to construction. So there has always been an interest and an excitement to be able to promote and encourage innovation in this space. And then being in a space like Selco, where I think when we started, it was to look at R&D and to look at innovation in the core of how we do programs and how we work. So while a big chunk of it, as I started off saying, is focusing on sustainability for community, we were also looking at sustainability in the future, which means that for, construction as an industry, looking at emissions, looking at practices for construction, what kind of skill sets exist. So it became a very sort of holistic approach, looking at the construction ecosystem, and technology R&D became a very big core to it. We started sort of seeking out innovators in the space, whether global or local. It became also very important for us to then even push into saying that while there is a lot of innovation and R&D happening in this space, very few of those trickle down into the communities that we work with, because of which then the other sort of prerogative became about saying that you need high-risk monies to be able to innovate for the poor, and not necessarily put that burden on the community we are working with to sort of own and innovate with. So, which is where we started looking at the first sort of crop of innovators we wanted to work with. There was a lot of learnings when it came to, what works, what doesn't work, what makes sense, applicability wise in the communities that we work for the different sort of climate spaces that we work in. And which is why I think being in the organization we are in and having sort of the kind of sort of partners that we do who are also not necessarily risk averse, it just became much more easy to sort of work with much more of the startup sort of types. Yes.
Nice. And I know, Suhail, you worked with EcoSTP when they had no customers, right? And today they have over 100 installations that spans the entire nation. Now, that is it's a pretty foundational type of a decision that you made, where you are entrusting the entire sewage treatment facility to a startup that really did not have any history. Right. So how, I mean, it is, I know you're not a gambler, but how did you kind of make that decision and slept well at night?
Yeah, so it's sort of a calculated gamble. So Brigade is there to back it up. You've done your homework. And I was in a position where every single sewage treatment plant that I've installed in my project has gone bust over the years. So there's no harm in trying a startup and see what happens. Anyway, the end result has been going bust. So that was the whole premise, that it's something new. If it works, it's good. I have a solution. Else, it's just what has happened in the past. That was the premise of working with EcoSTP, so to speak.
Right.
And in this project, my challenge was that I had encountered a lot of problems, and I had sort of vetted at least 50 different vendors before I stumbled upon EcoSTP. And I decided to go ahead because I had some cost savings in going with them. And that's why I tried them in that sense. And it turned out to be a great success.
So let's talk about failures. I mean, some experiments that you might have tried with startups that didn't really go to plan. Do you have any examples of that?
There is one with Reap itself. I don't want to take the name, but
No, but let's talk about the use case. Absolutely. I mean, I think let's be.
There was a vertical garden plan that I had in the same project, and we worked with one of the companies from Reap. But the failure was not really in the system itself, but the attitude of the people. They were not really responsive and things like that. So, I mean, when you pitch a new product, you need to be hands-on, but they were very hard to come by, and then we terminated the contract and went with somebody else.
Right. So, I mean, fundamentally, the idea is still something that you would go back to. If
idea is something that would go back to, but it would have to have better people to implement it and handhold it and stuff. So the attitude was an issue there.
So, Sunita, in let's say the project that you are currently doing in Bangalore, the net zero, I think it's called Eden, right? So, is a lot of the technology something that has been cooked in-house? And I suspect it is not. So how have you kind of gone around looking for the right kind of partners to fulfill this?
Okay, so this partnership piece is very interesting, and it's actually a Ministry of Power and Swiss Development Corporation partnership project called BEEP, Building Energy Efficiency Project, and this is promoted by the Ministry of Power. And so there are many partners, many people who do the BEEP projects. So BEEP is a project, but there are consultants who are empowered to do this. So EESL does it, GKSPL does it, EDF does, EDS, EDS, they do it. So many people who are technically, very good, they design better homes, help us design. So somebody from GKSPL had met me or somewhere, and they reached out saying that, are you interested? And this is something that, will not cost you a penny. But we'll have to work upfront, and there's a time commitment. So we actually analyzed a lot. We did a postmortem of all the different types of buildings that we have made so far. And they had actually reached out way earlier, 2016-17 time frame. But coming back, so this partnership with BEEP and BEEP RE. So BEEP RE is another initiative where the RE integration is the key, right? And this is through an agency called International Institute of Energy Conservation. So this partnership all fell in through conversations, And then we said, okay, let's look at this project. And I actually approached Arvind saying that, our CEO saying that, we really, as a part of my science-based target goals, we really need to make our sales gallery net zero. So we did. He said, "What's stopping you? Let's do it." So we did it. We presented. Then he challenged us, saying that, "Can you do the whole project?" So we said, "Okay, we can do the whole project." So it's those nudges given by him, and then with the partnerships, we were able to do it. In fact, the Swiss ambassador recently visited. He was at our site on March 30th, and they are really keen to, working even with us on our future
Nice.
projects. So that's the partnership piece that made it happen. So it's not about the technology as much as it is about better design.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Now, what are the biggest hurdles that are preventing this sector from adopting more sustainable interventions? What are the biggest challenges for the industry?
I can go first.
Sure.
So the consultants are the biggest challenges.
Okay, cut the middleman.
No, it's very
No,
tough.
but
to
give me
change that
an
mindset.
example then, Sohail. So let's talk specific, right? I mean,
Ah.
where is it kind of?
I mean, so they're very old school. They don't want to change their processes. They have set patterns. They are not liking the change. So typically in the case of EcoSTP itself, it's something they've never heard of. And they said, I will not sign off on it. I said that I'm taking a risk. It's either you sign off or you don't work with me. And then finally on protest, they signed off on it, but they were not accepting the technology at all. So, I mean, I'm a small company, so I took that call. But then when consultants put such a view in front of bigger developers, they go with the consultant because that's their domain of expertise. They don't want to argue with them. And therefore, they thwart them at the beginning itself. Say if an EcoSTP went to a consultant, he would never have got a POC so far, till date.
Mm-hmm.
And, unless they prove it elsewhere. So I would say consultants are the first guys to be taught that yes, these are the things that you can look at. So, and then it would be architects to adopt those ideas.
So it could be either lack of awareness or it could be insecurities, and
I wouldn't say insecurities because consultants don't have a stake in the vendors who are doing with them. So it's more about probably insecurity of failure, maybe. But but then it's their duty to try something new and introduce it to developers if it is good. So that's where I see a challenge. Say if you're not hands-on like me, it's tough for such small companies to come up.
Right.
Because I myself know, as John says, Brigade hasn't tried a lot of these startups simply because consultants haven't given a go-ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the challenge. I would say the biggest.
Okay.
Challenge.
Is it the same challenge for you as well, Sunita?
Look at my smile. So basically, I would twist the whole thing. While the challenge is there, it is also about not knowing, right? So if you also see the curriculum that mechanical engineers or electrical engineers have been exposed to, sustainability is not part of the agenda, right? So therefore, how will they do sustainability related solutions? Or if an architect is not able to even understand what sustainable design is, how will they even design a home that is supposed to be done in a particular way? And I think it needs a rethink of what kind of talent is out there. And if you don't know, I mean, I'm sure you know about it, Gautam. It's about the solar decathlon, which is being run by Prasad and his team for creating the talent pool of young blood who can actually convert buildings into net zero energy, water, and waste. Because this knowledge is not out there. There is no blueprint. Okay. So if you can count on your fingers how many consultants, MVP consultants are there who can really work on reducing not just the cost of construction, but also the lifetime cost. I can count who are there. So you can count the number of architects who actually understand climate responsive design. You can count on your fingers. I mean, I don't know whether they exist also. people who know sustainable urban drainage systems on landscape and the interplay of nature-based solutions. So if these solutions are relatively, I wouldn't say new, it is bringing back old knowledge in and deploying it at scale. This has to be unlearned. So a lot of unlearning needs to happen. And we come under time pressure, commercial pressure, and end up doing something which doesn't really meet the purpose of a lifetime cost savings, health, wellness benefit, and so on. So there's a lot of thoughtlessness in the game, and a lot of irresponsible use of materials. Materials per se may not be bad, but how do you use it and how do you work with nature is something that needs to be learned intuitively, and not many people can do it because there is no blueprint for this documented.
Right. What's your take, Nirmita? I know you struggle with project management also. I know that for a fact. So
that's because you're architects. No, I mean, for us, I think the equivalent for a consultant for us is the sort of construction skill force that we have out there, right? So while we're talking about educated, technical people like architects, engineers, not necessarily having the background or what it takes to sort of deploy, because like you rightly said, it's not something that is not taught though in classrooms or in universities. It is just not in architectural practices made more applicable or accessible to young designers. And I feel like what we are trying to do on the ground is another challenge, which is now you suddenly have to work with a mistri and a contractor who very small scale again, right? These micro contractors who never interacted with sustainable materials or sustainable design practices. So for us, it's also actually about what would it take to sort of go to a tier 2, tier 3 city or in a rural town and or a village and actually train the young architects, young contractors out there on design principles. So for us, it's about actually really creating that equity or inclusivity in the construction space itself, breaking down sustainability into thumb rules, really sort of putting that into practice. And it also ties back into the regulations and frameworks, right? For us, when it comes down to then saying, working with the government and saying, you need to write your tender documents in this manner so that any contractor, any sort of sustainable practitioner can sort of apply for it. This is how it needs to be. So we look at all, or rather we're aspiring to look at all sort of levels of aspect, which is the tradespeople who are part of the construction ecosystem, the regulatory frameworks that goes into sort of saying that this is how a subcenter in Anganwadi needs to be designed and built, and sort of looking at it cumulative. And that's the biggest challenge, because I can easily put out a tender tomorrow, but there'll be very low number of people sort of apply for something like this or understand how to sort of build like it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I've got two more questions before I open it up. I know we are coming to the top of the hour, and I know Suhail do you still have 5 more minutes, Suhail? 5-10?
Yeah, 5 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm going to ask you then, what does the roadmap look like for you from here on? What are the biggest opportunities that you see? See, you've already done something in your previous projects. In the next project that comes along, you'll probably apply the learnings that you have from your existing ones. But are there any new kind of opportunities that you've uncovered that you see for yourself and other construction companies?
So, I mean, in the current project, I focused on water as my theme, and I did learned a lot. And what I learned on the process is that in electrical, there is a lot of interventions that is definitely possible to reduce your load and your DG loading and things like that. That's something I learned. So it's a green building, and we had planned for 2 different DGs and different loads. One was a lesser load and one was a higher load, to sort of cater to a lower requirement and a higher requirement. And once done, we installed both the DGs. And so far, with 100% load, only the smaller DG has worked. The bigger DG has not worked so far. So this is something our consultants could not even fathom, that there is so much of energy savings involved in the building, and they did not advise us on this either. It's probably they're not educated, like Sunita was mentioning. They also need to have the awakening that, yes, if you do a green building with all these features included, there is massive energy savings, which is not really mapped by consultants so far. That's a huge learning that we had. And the next project would definitely be something that I go deep dive into electrical design factors, where the
So
customers.
so would that be your advice to other peers as well out there?
Yes, as well as your startups also, whether they can go into electrical as a domain to deep dive and see if they can bring in solutions for customers like us.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, okay. So, I mean, you brought up startups, what is your advice for startups who are basically trying to sell into what Nirmita calls a dinosaur industry, right? Where, how do you kind of train these startups that do not know the business of construction and real estate? They come in with their SaaS models and figure out a way to kind of give you
The
value.
point is, right now they're taking the low hanging fruits. They need to sort of, and construction industry is very less technology driven as of now. It's all in sales, marketing primarily, and probably a little bit of ERP. But if you go into the construction process itself, it's very less new technology that's come in, and a lot of materials can come in. So I would say that there's a lot of intervention in material research as well as cost. I mean, and you go to a developer that you're going to reduce your cost, they're going to be sitting and listening to you. If you go in a SaaS model and say that you spend so much X, Y, Z, etc., they may not listen. But if you say that I'll reduce the cost of construction, they'll definitely give you a hearing at least. That's an advice, and that's something that there is huge potential for. Since your PropTech accelerator, there's a huge potential for companies that are looking into cost of construction reduction with the spiraling costs that we have today.
Show them the money, basically. Make
Exactly.
more money, save more money. Somehow.
Exactly.
Nice. So, so Sunita, what are the biggest opportunities in your opinion for developers and for yourself as a company?
Well, the opportunity is, showing people that these kind of homes can be developed. Okay, it's a new category of homes that people should want and aspire for, rather than homes that are, not comfortable and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of things that people really need to be aware of. So it's a huge opportunity space. These are definitely better buildings, better, what do you call them? Townships or so on. So it's holistic living that can be nurtured, that can nurture the individual for a life, right? So it's an opportunity space. Okay. But I would like to get back to the point that Suhail made around the learnings that he has had from better systems. There is one thing that is stopping all of that. So you try and resize a STP. Actually, regulatory authorities will go by NBC, right? So I think at some point we also need to look at the guidelines and the local bylaws. I have a lot of challenges around, say, for example, you want to do waste segregation and you really have to put a chute. Chutes actually don't, help us meet the goal of waste segregation. So there are many different types of interventions that need to be done to enable sustainability to happen. And these are some of the challenges that we should be voicing and talking about, because not everything is about achieving the efficiency. If you achieve the efficiency, but then again the consultants also, they will do the pushback to you basis the regulatory, citing regulatory criteria. नहीं इतना ही बोला है, इतना water demand है तो इतना ही STP होना चाहिए, and so on. So sorry, I'm using Hindi out here, but sizing of STP is also something that needs to be thought through in a MOEF presentation, because they have said no, itna hi STP hona chahiye. What happens if people use more water? So, but we have designed for less water, right? Because there are raters out there. Okay, so how do you navigate it? And it is a battle at all fronts. You're trying to do something good, your consultants are not onboarded. The regulatory piece is difficult to navigate. Pushing it then becomes very, very difficult. So your battle is not just about the ROI. Even if you do the ROI and the business case and your business is convinced, these are these other challenges where you will get stuck for making sustainability happen.
So, I mean, I clearly see an opportunity for collaboration here, Sunita, where, when individual organizations are now tackling these solutions by themselves, and turns out that the problems are kind of common.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe,
absolutely.
if enough companies come together to kind of create some kind of an influencer or a / lobby type of a scenario, it's definitely something that, I'm going to put a kind of a task item for ourselves to see how we can pursue that. So yeah, I mean, that Nirmita, you get the last word on that before I turn it open to all the participants for questions. What are your biggest, opportunities that you think you want to go after, or startups need to go after, in your opinion?
I mean, I keep articulating this, I think, in every panel I end up going into, is that the problem statements are many when you're working with communities like we do, right? So specifically for innovation, R&D, looking at challenges where we're talking about small footprints, talking about improving efficiency of space, improving consumption of energy. I mean, all of these things, and there is honestly a gold mine if you think about it at the bottom of the pyramid, right? Where there are no services or sort of solutions that are marketed for the poor, and people will invest when they see sort of an impact or a positive impact for them, right? So for me, I mean, we've been sort of really struggling to look at cool roofing solutions, looking at low energy air conditioners, right, in really heat stress locations, looking at, and the thing is also, when you look at the stakeholders that we work with, there is a great appetite in government and in sort of private for this sort of industry itself. I mean, for the development space itself. And I mean, it's very easy for anyone to sort of access us also to sort of be able to then co-design or co-develop any of those solutions. I think for me, it would be more about being able to network and find these people to be able to then provide demonstration space and space for sort of innovation on the ground. So for us, I think that is the most important. And like I was saying, when I speak of governances, I mean, I feel like the more of the IAS officers that I meet, the more we understand that there's so much appetite for something new. So products that can be scaled easily with such of players like these. So if you're looking at, again, any of these solutions that I sort of spoke of, it's very easy to sort of productize the building sector, some components, some modules, and then be able to sort of access any of these stakeholders that I spoke of. Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to turn it over to any questions. I see there was a question that I think Suhail's already addressed in the chat. If any of you would like to pipe in, absolutely go for it. Any questions from the audience here? And you can raise your hand, we can unmute you. And I guess not. Great. So thank you so much for making the time. I think this has been a really engaging conversation as far as I'm concerned. I see Pratik put in a message there saying our applications are open, of course, for cohort 12 at Brigade Reap. So if there are any startups around, please check out www.brigadereap.com. Thank you again so much, Nirmita, Sunita, and Suhail. And I look forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you so
much.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.